Kaguya-Sama, Love is War has captured the hearts and minds of the anime fandom like few other works in the rom-com canon, as evidenced by the fact that the suits actually ordered enough seasons to reach the confession arc, a thing that literally never happens. I myself have been enamored with the series from first sight. I love it so much I've written 3 different video essays on the subject so far, totaling nearly an hour of content, and I'm here today to tell you I barely scratched the surface with those. You'd be forgiven for thinking, as I once did, that this show is merely an exceptionally character-rich love story with a hilariously clever premise, a wickedly sharp and subversive sense of humor, and one of the most fun and inventive approaches to animation of any manga adaptation out there. However, if you look a little deeper, and by a little I mean read the manga, rewatch the entire anime, and read the spin-off 4-Koma plus the official doujinshi, you'll come to realize that not only is it far deeper than you thought, you can't actually see the bottom from where you are yet. Kaguya-Sama Love is War might just be the smartest anime I've ever seen. Yes, I've seen the time travel one, and the giant robot mom one, and the naked cyborg one. No, I am not joking. There is foreshadowing in Chapter 4 of this series that doesn't enter play until Chapter 200. Its use of symbolism and literary references as both thematic and narrative tools is nothing short of genius, and it is packed to bursting with painstakingly researched facts about an astoundingly wide range of esoteric topics, from hip-hop to ramen to fashion to Apex Legends to astronomy to professional YouTubing. So I can personally vouch that this anime is
so educational!
It can also be shockingly philosophically profound, often at the moments when you least expect it, and frequently in the middle of its funniest jokes, Carlin style. And while naturally the bulk of the deeper truths that it chooses to hang its punchlines on relate to romance and relationships, if you pay attention, you might also learn a thing or two about the power of artistic expression, or the true nature of popularity, or maybe how referendums can be easily rigged to manufacture consent for policies that directly contravene the interests of the public. Perhaps most impressively of all, despite the fact that its whole premise is ultimately just one big elaborate joke about how horny teenagers overthink everything, the series portrays asymmetrical information warfare between genius intellects in an even more convincing and strategically compelling fashion than the king of the genre itself, Death Note. It is tied with Kaiji in my eyes for the best non-battle battle anime ever, and it will remain as such until such a time as someone animates the valiant tale of me dying on that hill. There are so many fucking layers to this thing. You have no idea. But by the end of this video, you will hopefully have some. Or at least some stuff to think on. And maybe, if you're really lucky, some classic Japanese snacks to munch on, courtesy of today's sponsor, Bokksu. Hey, President Shirogane Kaicho, we gotta arrange a special Japanese snack tray for all them Frenchies coming to visit our school from France. But we're all out of the Japanese snacks. How can we get some? Don't we live in Japan? Couldn't we just... Do not worry, Kaguya. I have anticipated this problem with my genius brain meat and ordered us a Bokksu already. Also, because I am poor and think about money all the time, I used the code BASEMENT at checkout to get $15 off that Bokksu. Bokksu? What's that? Is anyone listening to... Bokksu is a subscription service that sends a curated, themed collection of authentic Japanese snacks straight to your door every month. They got mochis, dangos, even rice crackers, and these addictive little freeze-dried chocolate strawberry things that taste like if you made an entire fruit out of just strawberry Pocky coating. They're amazing. Plus, every box comes with a cute little guidebook to aid your taste buds in their tourism. Why are you guys talking like that? What's going on? Okay, that's the end of the ad now. Please remember to use the promo code BASEMENT to get $15 off your first delicious Bokksu order. Plus, also to support this YouTube channel. Bye! It's gonna take a while to cover everything that makes this series so great, so let's get all the superficial, obvious stuff out of the way up front. Kaguya-Sama Love is War is a brilliantly scripted manga that, through innovative use of battle manga dynamics as a humorous and relatable metaphor for teenage social politics and hormones, manages to reinvent or elevate almost every cliched joke in the rom-com genre, while also delivering an emotionally resonant slow-burn tale of true love and a fast-paced, heart-pounding, harem-adjacent romance royale at the same time. Series creator Aka Akasaka's character art is a little bit on the rough side, but it conveys emotion very clearly, and his deft understanding of composition and shading allows him to create beautifully flowing page layouts that give the plot a distinctly cinematic pacing. Combine that with his ability to shift styles seamlessly from shoujo to shonen, or from action to drama to romance to horror, and this allows him to deliver striking and inventive visual punchlines at a truly breathless rate. There are lots of manga that can make me laugh, but it is rare to find one that makes me feel like I actually can't stop laughing, and rarer still to find one that can do that and make me cry moments later. Director Shinichi Omata's adaptation of the series preserves this quality of the manga by employing a vast array of directing techniques and visual references spanning many genres and eras of film, animation, even video games. The character designs have also been cleaned up and simplified for more immediate marketability, and it makes use of efficient, digitally augmented animation to match the bouncy energy of the manga without demanding nearly as much of A1 Pictures' thin-stretched animation staff as a more traditional Sakuga-heavy approach like what we see in Nichijou would. And, of course, the great music, voice acting, and sound direction only elevates all of that even higher. It is genuinely astounding not just how good Kaguya-Sama looks and feels to watch, but how consistently it has kept that quality up under the brutal conditions of the anime industry. Kevin, the founder of Sakuga-Boru, talks about this a lot, specifically in regards to Kaguya-Sama. Between you and me, he seems kind of obsessed, but who am I to talk? Anyway, he makes some very good tweets and blogs about it that I would highly recommend reading after you watch this if you've got the time. At any rate, regardless of the medium you experience it through, Kaguya-Sama Love is War is one of the most impressively constructed and produced works of art out there, and an uproarious exemplar within its particular comedic niche. All of that is layer one, the immediately self-evident qualities of the series that draw new viewers and readers in to begin with. Layer 2 is reached once those viewers and/or readers realize that, in addition to being quite funny, the non-battle battle elements of the series are genuinely fantastic Shonen Jump caliber shit. There is a palpable back-and-forth tension present in every single scene. The rules and stakes are always clearly defined and designed for maximum drama. The strategies and psychological tricks employed to turn the tables in those back-and-forth exchanges are genuinely clever, and unlike the vast majority of battle and non-battle battle anime, the outcomes of the non-battle battles feel both unpredictable and well-earned at the same time. If making animele's wasn't a complete content ID nightmare, I'd probably have made at least one about this show. And if it surprises you that a comedy anime would be that good at doing action anime type stuff, then you clearly haven't heard my rant about the power of gag manga. Even on the face of it, Kaguya-Sama's core conceit is just stupidly funny. Two geniuses, one rich, one poor, wasting most of their student council work hours playing elaborate mind games with each other, all to trick the other into confessing their affection first so that they don't have to be the bottom. But, unlike most rom-com concepts, it doesn't rely on the characters being stupid for the jokes to land. quite the opposite, actually. The more intelligent, strategic, and analytical Shinomiya and Shirogane act, the more incongruous and therefore hilarious it becomes that they're expending so much of their mighty mental energy on something so fundamentally trivial. This unexpected synergy between battle manga and rom-com tropes allows each side of the story to shine without diminishing the other's brilliance. And those are far from the only aspects of the manga that work that beautifully in concert. Kaguya-Sama's plot is persistently character-driven, meaning that the events that make up the story are all directly caused by the choices and actions of various characters within the cast, and those choices and actions are in turn the result of those characters' internal logic, their desires and personalities, which are in turn shaped by their past experiences. And all of those details are ridiculously, meticulously well-defined, even for the series' most seemingly minor background characters. Of course, a lot of things do simply happen because Aka Akasaka thought they'd be funny. It's a comedy, that's how comedies work, but it rarely feels like that as you're reading it because he is so damn good at setting the characters up in such a way that, of course, that's what would happen. That's the only way that it could happen. And if you ever feel like some aspect of a chapter's story was underexplained or came out of nowhere, there's a better chance than not that that side of things is covered in the 4-panel manga spin-off We Want to Talk About Kaguya-Sama, which follows Erika, a delusional Kaguya fangirl, and her best friend Karin, an equally delusional Shirogane Kaguya shipper, as they observe the events of the main story from a safe distance and wildly misinterpret almost everything that happens. They barely interact with the main cast, mostly because they faint from fangirl vapors around Kaguya and the Prez, but they are friends with most of their friends, so their interactions and side stories with those side characters often have knock-on effects in the main plot. This naturalistic approach to writing also allows the anime's running gags to evolve organically over time instead of devolving into repetitive formula, keeping them funny. The erosion of Chika's sanity and her relationship with Shirogane through each successive training arc is an obvious example of this, but my favorite has gotta be the Kashiwagi's boyfriend bit. The initial joke there is that when asked for romantic advice by complete strangers, both Kaguya and Miyuki are immediately capable of objectively identifying everything that they're doing wrong in their own relationship and offering very helpful advice on how to fix it. As that gets old and Kashiwagi's relationship advances, though, the source of the humor naturally shifts over to how increasingly unqualified these two monster virgins are to be giving any advice to people so far ahead of them. Then, with a bit of time to incubate over summer vacation, the joke evolves again to being about how Kashiwagi and her boyfriend are just the nastiest fucking freaks and don't particularly care who knows it, which is a bit of a problem for Kashiwagi's best friend, Maki, who, as Shirogane correctly deduced entirely by accident in the first of these gags, had a crush on Kashiwagi's boyfriend before they got together. And this naturally leads into a new running gag where Maki, who is just the cutest, comes to the council room every so often to ask Ishigami and Shirogane for boy advice, but actually it's just an excuse to get together and seethe about people who are happier than them, which they all find to be an immensely cathartic bonding experience. And around the same time that running gag takes over, Kashiwagi ends up taking a completely new role in the story as the only person with the requisite experience to actually read the vibe between Kaguya and the president. By the way, Karin and Erika from Talk About Kaguya just happen to be Kashiwagi and Maki's other besties, meaning there's a whole other side to that side plot and a whole bunch of bonus Maki suffering jokes that you won't even see unless you read the 4-koma, ideally as it was intended, chapter by chapter alongside Love is War, which there's no official way to do in English right now, so That kind of sucks, but it also speaks to just how much is actually going on under the hood to make the comedy and romance in this rom-com anime run as smoothly as they do. While the show can often feel like a totally self-contained stage play, confined as much of the chapter-to-chapter action is to the carefully crafted set that is the Shuchin Student Council's office, the academy that surrounds that office is also a living, breathing social ecosystem made up of clubs, cliques, and friend circles, and dominated by a cold, uncaring animal hierarchy that happens to mirror in microcosm the much larger, cold, uncaring animal hierarchy that most of the students' parents sit atop. But we'll get to the obligatory part of the video essay where I explain how this is all about socialism later. As the chapters pass, the seasons progress, and the obligatory holiday and school event arcs come and go, these groups and individuals around the school all stay in motion around the main cast. Things that happen in the council chamber end up echoing out through the student body, and the resulting atmosphere around the school in turn has a pronounced effect on the council's behavior. And there's a whole Earth's worth of stuff happening outside the bubble of the school that likewise has an impact on what happens within it, like when Chika and the Tabletop Club got into Pokemon Go. Recently, in the manga, someone finally told Chika about Among Us, and I am very excited to see where that goes, but I digress. Kaguya-Sama's plot has an absolutely insane number of moving parts, many of which you'll only realize weren't static background elements on your second or third watch, and most certainly many more that Aka Akasaka hasn't even revealed yet. It's too many, frankly, to even try to nail them down in a single video, at least not as long as I'm trying to make more than one of these things in a month. So from this point forward, in order to keep my analysis manageable and help you see just how ingeniously engineered the narrative machinery behind this story really is, I'm gonna focus squarely on its core dramatis personae, the 5 members of the student council, Ai Hayasaka, and the Shirogane family. Plus the narrator, of course. Can't forget about the narrator. Actually, let's do him first. One of Kaguya-Sama's signature comedic flourishes is, of course, the intense, melodramatic kaiji-style narration that accompanies its various romantic mind games. Kaguya's narrator makes the stakes of each battle of wits and love crystal clear from the outset and ensures that all watching or reading are aware of the mighty feats of mental fortitude that the president and vice president achieve in each of those battles. Like a great fight announcer, his words lend an appropriate sense of gravitas to each encounter, or rather, an entirely inappropriate sense of gravitas, given that this is all horny teen delusions, but that's what makes him so funny. The English dub of Kaguya-Sama casts the talented Ian Sinclair as the narrator, and he approaches the role from a more playful, sardonic direction than Yutaka Aoyama, poking fun at the character's youthful delusions and even breaking into laughter on occasion, instead of just playing it completely straight. I've spent a long time ragging on this decision based mostly on isolated clips from Twitter and Reddit, but now that I've actually seen those clips within the context of the whole dub, I do think that it works really well for what Funimation was going for. The performance made me laugh my ass off exactly where I was supposed to laugh in the original Japanese version, and ultimately that's the key to a comedy translation success, so kudos to all involved for that. That said, this change does kind of undermine what the narrator represents, thematically speaking. High schoolers live in their own little world, isolated from adult concerns, where, unless something really traumatic happens, their biggest worries are who likes who and what's gonna be on the next exams. For them, that shit is just as deadly serious as whatever nonsense the economy or the Supreme Court's doing right now is to you or I. The narrator's job isn't to describe the real world then, but rather the self-contained world that these students have built for themselves within it. Because of this, his narration is able to be simultaneously omniscient and unreliable. He knows what everyone is thinking, but his words don't necessarily reflect the objective reality around Shuchin Academy. Instead, he mostly describes the internal strategies and mutually agreed upon rules, spoken and unspoken, of the various games played within its halls. But if those rules change, his words will too. For example, he continually reinforces the series' core conceit that the one who confesses their love first loses, right up until the point that Kaguya and the president both realize that was just an excuse for their fear of rejection, and then he drops it. It's the central hook of the entire series, and he just drops it because the protagonists have grown past it. That change doesn't have nearly as hard of an impact, and the preceding joke that he's indignant that Kaguya rejected the premise he spent so long hyping up doesn't really work at all when he already spends half the series poking fun at that very same premise. Now, at the end of the day, that is just a voice acting nitpick. The dubbed narrator is quite funny and works, I'd say, 99% of the time, but it does serve to highlight just how much thought actually went into how the original version of the narrator was written and presented. And again, he is just the narrator, so that should tell you something about how deep we're about to dive into these characters. Let's start our analysis of the student council with Miko Ino, the last member to join, and thus the easiest element to isolate from the mix. Miko stands apart from the otherwise extremely silly cast of Kaguya-Sama by being very, very serious. One might say, absurdly so. As a member of the school's disciplinary committee, she is committed to stamping out all forms of fun on campus at any cost. Or at least that's how most of the other students see her. In her eyes, she's just a firm believer in the social compact who understands that in order to be able to do fun and cool things, teenagers need to show enough responsibility for the adults around them to trust them. And obviously the best way to do that is to make all the boys in school get mandatory buzz cuts, which has, and I can't stress this enough, absolutely nothing to do with how hot she may or may not think bald guys are. So, okay, maybe Miko ever so slightly pushes her values and ideals on other people without taking anyone else's perspective into account ever and calls that justice, which is perhaps a slightly dangerous tendency to have for a character who is also the kind of person who believes everything she reads on the internet, but it's not really her fault. See, Miko was raised by a Supreme Court justice and an international humanitarian activist, neither of whom really had much time to offer her much more in the way of parenting than basic moral instruction. As a result, the idea that there are lots of bad people in the world who need to have their behavior corrected by good people like her and them is central not just to Miko's kind of childish internal sense of justice, but also to her internal justifications for her parents' neglect. Because of all that, she overworks herself to both excel in school, as society demands of her, and to enforce the rules, as she believes her parents demand of her. This is very similar to what motivates the workaholic President Shirogane, who's had to bust his ass from a very young age ever since his dad lost his job and his mom left the family. A big part of why he works so hard is, of course, the simple necessity of helping his dad pay rent and put food on the table, but he also has pretty severe abandonment issues and a bit of an inferiority complex due to his mom only taking his sister that push him to excel in academics as well. At first, due to their rivalry for the presidency, and following that, a series of hilarious misunderstandings that lead Miko to believe the president is a Bill Clinton-type president, they don't really get along so good. But once that's cleared up, their similarities and Miko's many weird hobbies slowly draw them together, and the president becomes something of a role model for her, showing her how to lighten up on others and, more importantly, on herself. A skill that should, with any luck, help her get closer to the vice president too, though that is far easier said than done, because Miko isn't just a foil for the president. She also reflects and amplifies aspects of all the student council members, and not all of them are quite so blindly altruistic as he is. More specifically, Miko mirrors Kaguya in that they are both extremely awkward people who struggle to make friends. Miko, because she has trouble approaching others without being reflexively abrasive and controlling. Kaguya, because her elite reputation makes others scared to approach her, and the ones that do are just as likely to be trying to take advantage of her. This means they don't really talk much, and because they're also both extremely rash, judgmental people with trust issues and deeply twisted imaginations, they end up jumping to some wildly dark conclusions about each other, though since all of Miko's assumptions involve Kaguya and the president doing filthy things in secret together, Kaguya generally takes her accusations as compliments, thus diffusing the tension on her end completely. And, by the same token, since all of the things that Miko assumes about the would-be couple are clearly so completely wrong, and she's frequently faced with evidence that proves her wrong, this leads her naturally to double down and assume that they're doing even kinkier shit that they're even better at hiding than she first thought. Because while she and Kaguya are both pure and maidenly in how they present themselves to the world, in Miko's case, that's less a result of being sheltered and naive, and more a byproduct of how terrifyingly repressed she is, which she covers for by constructing an elaborate fantasy where her plucky, pure-hearted righteousness stands up in the face of all the filthy temptation that everybody in the council room must be feeling. Like, it can't just be her, and she purges it of corruption. Ironically, the most corrupt member of the student council by a wide margin, Chika, just happens to be Miko's idol, and thus completely immune to all of this scrutiny. No matter how silly, selfish, stupid, or amoral the council's secretary acts, Miko will automatically assume that she's doing her best and smartest job to be an upstanding student and citizen, and go along with it without question. Miko is such a simp that even after Chika tells her to her face that she's easily manipulated by anyone who gives her a compliment, all it takes to smooth that over is a few compliments. Despite her intentions to be a stabilizing influence on the student council, Miko's presence ultimately only amplifies Chika's ability to destabilize it on a whim. If Chika ever becomes a dictator, Miko would be her #1 most useful idiot. And that's not even the only way she fuels instability. She's also constantly butting heads with her fellow junior council member, Treasurer Yu Ishigami, who enjoys playing video games at school about as much as she enjoys confiscating video games from school. But it runs way deeper than that. These two went to middle school together, and they have history. Miko is someone who does difficult, unpopular things simply because she believes it's necessary and right, including sticking up for Ishigami to other students and faculty behind the scenes, though she keeps that from him and keeps it on the down low, too. Ishigami, with his equally strong sense of justice, actually respects the shit out of her for that, even if he hates it when she takes his Switch away, and does a ton to support her and minimize her embarrassment, likewise behind the scenes to protect her feelings. As a result, when they're around each other, all Miko can think about is how much happier Ishigami would be if he weren't a delinquent slacker, and all Ishigami can think about is how much trouble she'd save herself by being just a little bit less prudish and aggressive. And given that they're both pretty depressed people who don't by nature have huge reserves of energy and who have just expended most of the goodwill they have toward each other on clandestine efforts to help each other, when they're actually around each other, pretty much all they can do is fixate on those flaws and try to fix them. If you've seen a rom-com before, anime or otherwise, you can probably guess how those feelings are going to resolve themselves in time, but I wouldn't be calling this show and manga genius if that was anywhere near all there is to it.
God knows I've fallen in love.
Yu Ishigami is quite unlike any other character in any other lovey-dovey anime you've ever seen. Well, okay, actually that's not entirely true. As a sullen, socially isolated otaku whose classmates can't see past his outcast reputation to the nice, well-meaning dude hidden within, up until a watershed moment in his second year of high school gives him a ton of unexpected female attention all at once, there is a certain rom-com character archetype he resembles quite strikingly, namely protagonists of the wish-fulfilling, audience-inserty variety. Nerdy dudes who get the girl and/or 3+ girls solely so that the nerdy dudes reading can live vicariously through them. The key difference is, of course, that Ishigami isn't the protagonist of this anime, and because the audience already identifies with Shirogane and Shinomiya by the time he's introduced, this allows the series to do a lot of really interesting things with his character that would never fly with readers who are trying to wear him like pants. For starters, it's able to present him from an external perspective as kind of a creep, a well-meaning, unintentional creep, so he's still sympathetic, but at the same time, you can see why other students get a weird vibe from him and want to keep their distance, and why some would be inclined to believe such nasty rumors about him. It's also very painfully believable how he contributes to starting those rumors through little fault of his own. Aside from his tendency to bury unpleasant feelings in escapist media, Ishigami is fundamentally defined by 4 traits. There's the aforementioned innate sense of justice, of course. He's also quiet and observant by nature, and when you combine that with an intuitive ability to connect dots that others miss, it's easy to see why the student council so deeply values his data crunching abilities. Unfortunately, those abilities also come bundled with an ironic inability to read any social cue or understand how others perceive him even a little bit. Combined, these traits made it all but inevitable that he'd one day butt heads with a two-faced two-timer like Ko Ogino, even if he wasn't crushing on the girl being cheated on. And it was equally inevitable that the popular, charismatic other guy would win their battle in the court of public opinion, because guys like Ishigami, and I say this from experience, tend to greatly overestimate how far being objectively right will actually get them in convincing their peers and teachers of that rightness. Ishigami's backstory is obviously a bit on the extreme and melodramatic side, but the chain of events that leads up to it feels very true to life. Okay, so he paints an atypically detailed and nuanced portrait of a character archetype that tends to be rather flat and nebulously defined, while taking that character in unexpected and subversive directions. But so what? Anime is made for nerds. There's tons of well-developed, interesting, believably flawed nerd heroes out there whose stories also subvert the typical rom-com or harem route. What makes Ishigami so special? The fact that he doesn't actually subvert that part at all. By the end of this 3rd season, between Miko and his cheer squad senpai Tsubame, Yu is already well on his way to forming a classic love triangle, and there's plenty of time left in the source material to tack at least a few more vertices onto that. But Ishigami isn't getting all this attention all of a sudden simply because that's what the lonely nerds in the audience want to see. No, Yu naturally grows into that interest and out of being a lonely nerd over the course of the series as a direct result of his interactions with the rest of the council and eventually the cheer squad, plus his own determination to change himself for the better. Now, you might think the president's incredible work ethic would be what inspires that change, but Ishigami and Shirogane are pretty different people, and Yu doesn't really have that kind of discipline, so he can't exactly emulate the president's success. The most help he really gets from Miyuki is encouragement as his best friend, which ain't nothing, of course, but it's ultimately only Kaguya who's able to help him overcome his perpetual procrastination, which is quite the unexpected turn of events, since the only reason it takes several episodes for Ishigami to be introduced in the first place is he's avoiding Kaguya, whom he's pretty sure wants to murder him. He is, after all, the only student council member observant enough to notice both how she acts around the president and the cold, calculating remnants of Ice Queen Shinomiya lingering in her gaze, but it's precisely the experience of changing herself from that old, antisocial, kinda murdery form that allows Kaguya to see the path Ishigami needs to follow and give him the push he needs down it. And what's more, she does so using the very same harsh Shinomiya clan discipline that created that persona in the first place. She also happens to be blunt enough to tell Ishigami straight to his face when things he thinks are sweet and romantic are actually kind of off-putting and creepy, and moreover, why they'd be creepy from a girl's perspective, which is incredibly valuable advice for the kind of guy that he is. Having made steps to correct his game addiction and slacking and improve his grades, Ishigami feels empowered to change more things about himself and joins the cheer squad, since they're the exact kind of happy, popular people whom he both despises and secretly wishes he could be. At first, he doesn't get along with them at all, assuming that all their cheerful affects are fake, the same as Ogino's friendly outward persona. But as he keeps working at it, experiences all of them cheering for him, and finally works up the courage to look them all in the eye, he realizes that not only is their enthusiasm authentic, but they're the kind of genuinely nice people who can look past petty teen drama and rumors to see the kind of guy he really is. It's almost the exact same arc that Malcolm in the Middle goes through in the episode where he joins the Booster Club, only because Kaguya-Sama doesn't have a status quo to maintain, the lesson actually sticks. Ishigami's new friends quickly start rubbing off on him, and he begins pushing himself to impress them, especially Tsubame on account of how beautiful and perfect she is. In other words, he gets a handle on his impulses, makes a conscious effort to be a more sociable, direct, and open-minded person, and only after all of that does he enter the harem anime phase of his high school career. Not because that's what the readership wants, but because he actually managed to turn himself into the kind of guy a woman would want to be with. That's right, using only 100 plus chapters worth of character development, Kaguya-Sama actually was able to make the basic premise of a harem anime feel completely believable and natural. Which is pretty crazy. I mean, that's probably the least realistic genre of anime there is, and the other genres literally have magic in them. And what's extra crazy is they pulled all of that off as part of the B-plot of a regular hot popular people getting with each other type rom-com, which actually gives Kaguya-Sama a lot of leeway to develop Ishigami's relationships in extremely goofy, unpredictable ways that would never fly if the series had to hang its big emotions on those same big moments. Moments like when he takes Tsubame around the culture festival to get to know her better and work up the guts to confess eventually in like a week or two maybe, only to make an extremely bold public confession entirely by accident and without realizing it, because he's one of the only students in the entire school who's too out of the loop to know the urban legend about heart-shaped gifts at the festival, which is both a great joke and great storytelling, because it allows him to unintentionally fake the one thing he still needs to make top-tier husbando status that no amount of self-help advice or image training could ever realistically give him: effortless confidence. And that, in turn, makes the confession so effective that Tsubame, whose first instinct was just to reject him automatically, actually starts seriously thinking about it, weighing the ups and downs of dating her junior and agonizing to the point that she has to ask him to wait for her answer in an extremely tender and emotional scene where he still hasn't realized that he's confessed yet and will not for quite some time. That is sublime comedy writing. 0 notes. Well, okay, I do have one side note. There's also some very clever wordplay at play in the confession scene that you might not have noticed. See, Ishigami's accidental confession happens because he can't read the air. Or, to put it in Japanese, kuki ga yomenai. I went into a ton of depth on that particular colloquialism in my video on Bunny Girl Senpai if you want to learn a lot more about it, but to give you the basics, it's an insult that's frequently thrown at nerds. Now, when you translate the English word cookie into Japanese katakana, it's almost identical to the hiragana reading of the word for air, kuki. And because this situation resulted from Ishigami being unable to read the meaning of a giant cookie, one could also say kuki ga yomenai. This doesn't really contribute anything to the deeper meaning of the show. I just think it's neat that Akasaka put that much extra thought into one joke that was already gonna be one of the funniest jokes ever written in any anime, and is part of one of the best geek rom-coms I've ever read in my entire life, which again is just the B-plot of a slow burn pretty and popular people romance manga that's somehow even better than that. There is so much more I want to say about Ishigami and especially Miko based on the manga, but since A1 has already confirmed that they're still making more of the anime, I don't want to spoil any of that for you. What I do want, though, is for you to be aware of how hard I am holding back right now. I know a lot of y'all have been calling Ishigami best girl since he was first introduced, basically, but you honestly have no idea how accurate a moniker that actually is. But even at this early point in his story, he is still providing us with quality romantic catharsis plus a ton of moe, and, of course, still serving the role he always has within the clubroom's comedic dynamic as the straight man who bluntly cuts through everyone else's bullshit. Well, mostly one specific person's bullshit. Perhaps the most vital and challenging key to understanding Kaguya-Sama's cast dynamics is the F factor. Chika Fujiwara, an unpredictable being of pure chaos whose sole reason for existing, it seems, is to complicate and consternate her fellow council members' plans, and whose mysterious mind's inner workings are so opaque that not even her genius best friends can wrap their heads around them. Or so the narrator would have you believe. But if Chika was truly a totally random and unpredictable character, there's no way she'd have such a clearly defined, dare I say, iconic personality, because there'd be no consistent pattern of behavior to build that personality from. She actually operates on very defined and clearly observable rules, just like every other member of the cast. The trick is that those rules can change at any moment based on a number of factors, including how much attention Kaguya's paid to her lately, whether or not she's had to talk to Ishigami today, if she's discovered a new skill set that the president is a little lacking in, how she feels right now at this specific moment, if there's a rare Pokemon around, and whether or not she can smell love in the air. It is perhaps easier to understand Chika not as one character, but as several different overlapping characters who happen to inhabit the same adorably pink avatar. The first of these characters, henceforth referred to as Treasurer Chika, is essentially a high-functioning narcissist. She is convinced that she's the funniest, coolest, nicest, most popular kid in the whole school, plus just as much of a genius as Kaguya and Miyuki in her specific areas of interest, and she craves constant validation of that viewpoint. Normally, her strategy for attaining that validation is simply to act nice, cool, and funny, and hope people notice. However, if she sees a chance to look clever or impress people by going above and beyond in some way, or to insert herself into the middle of a situation that everyone else is already paying attention to, she will usually take it, even if the end result would actively go against her own future self-interests. It is very easy to mistake this behavior for altruism and an interest in other people. Now, on the flip side of that, if someone challenges her self-image, usually Ishigami, then she will immediately change to attack mode Chika in an effort to assert that she is inherently better than that person, and thus their criticism can be safely disregarded. Failing this, or if she takes some other form of ego damage, such as an embarrassing loss at a board game, Subject F will revert to sulky Chika, who is generally just a bummer to be around and can't be relied on for much of anything. However, she usually snaps out of that pretty quick as soon as she can do something to cheer herself up, like manipulating Miko into praising her or hurting someone else's feelings, usually Ishigami's. Sulky Chika is a petty, self-indulgent creature, which makes it very easy to please. Sometimes even the president will provoke her into attack mode by accident, though it's much harder for her to actually dismiss him because he's demonstrably better at school than she is and her direct superior. However, the respect that this engenders is tempered over time, in part by how he constantly needs her help to cover for his absurd weaknesses, but mostly by her own personal feelings that while the wealth gap is fundamentally unjust and poor people really do deserve pity and compassion, they also shouldn't be allowed to live in the nice parts of Tokyo where her family's at. So she finds a way to talk down to him, despite how absurd the notion of that is on its face. The one exception to the attack mode rule is Kaguya, Chika's best friend, and quite possibly the only human being on Earth she's actually willing to take criticism from. Chika will do anything for Kaguya, whether Kaguya likes it or not, and this rule supersedes all other rules for all forms of Chika, except when Chika chooses to put Chika first, which is most of the time. Now, looping back to Chika's rich family and the reason she hates the poor, the Fujiwara clan is a political dynasty whose roots stretch all the way back to the days of the samurai. And if their fruits are any indication, those roots are profoundly, incurably rotten. Yeah, pretty clear that girl's running with the wrong crowd. And Chika, too, is the daughter of a two-faced politician through and through. Without blinking, without dropping her cheery, innocent affect for even a moment, Chika engages in bribery, blackmail, and bold-faced lying as naturally as she breathes. She is earnest and honest to a fault a good 75% of the time, but the second she sees a chance to gain an advantage, win a prize, or uncover a secret by lying or cheating, she will not hesitate to do it. Even if she doesn't actually need or want what she stands to gain, Chika will do it just because she can. Which often means she can't, of course, because lying is her single most predictable trait. In fact, the chances that Chika will lie jump to nearly 100% the second she dons her third persona, Gamer Chika. Chika is a member of the Tabletop Gaming Club in part because she needs to relax and have a hobby that's not too intensive, and in part because it's a pretty good way to study game theory for her future career as Prime Minister, which she definitely was not joking about. But really, all of those things are just convenient side benefits. At her core, Chika's in it for one reason: to win it. At any cost, and damn the consequences. Because in life, there's everything else, and then there's motherfucking Settlers of Catan. In every game, no matter the stakes and no matter the context, Chika plays like she's in a cheating contest with all the Yu-Gi-Oh! And Kaiji villains at the same time. No trick is too dirty, no blow too low, and absolutely nothing is sacred. Not love, and certainly not friendship. If Chika can see a path to victory, she will take it, and if not, she will make it, or at least she'll try because, again, her friends play with her quite a lot and her cheating is very predictable, even if her methods are quite clever and subtle. The only time gamer Chika will actually tell the truth is if she coincidentally happens to think that doing so will help her win. To put it simply, when a game is afoot, Chika has no morals and no bottom. But it's not all bad, because in stark contrast to gamer Chika, we also have Subject F's best self, Love Detective Chika. Love Detective Chika loves love. She eats love. She breathes love. She is a pure, hopeless, yet not naive romantic who delights in talking about that single greatest of human emotions, and especially in uncovering love secrets or finding clever love solutions to tricky love problems. Where gamer Chika is pathologically dishonest, Love Detective Chika does not lie, even when the truth is painful or her honest opinion is just kind of blunt and mean. Though even that is slightly less likely to happen in this mode. Slightly, because Love Detective Chika is the only version of Chika who makes even the slightest effort to read a room so as not to ruin girl talk. And Love Detective Chika does not lie because love is the one ambiguously good thing that Chika still 100% sincerely believes in. And she knows she must defend that feeling at all costs against the harsh and cruel world that seeks to crush it.
終わらない戦争、なくならない貧富の差。
ちょっと受験とか悩みとかそういう小さなやつで。
Everything else in Chika's world, even music, she sees as tainted by the corrupt and controlling society that rules over us all. Corruption that she knows better and with greater familial intimacy than any teenager really should. But love, and love alone, remains pure in defiance of that corruption, and so Chika treasures it more than anything. She loves Kaguya, and all of the special treatment that her friend receives springs from that feeling. But that's not even her final form. No, love also gives her the power, in the most dire of circumstances, to overcome greater pains and hardships than any man or woman ever ought to bear. I am, of course, talking about Mama Chika, who is there to patiently guide President Miyuki Shirogane through all the intense training arcs that he needs to hit a volleyball instead of his own face, or sing without making everyone in his immediate vicinity vomit. In this form, her harsh honesty is a boon rather than a bane, and it has a limit. She'd never, ever tell her precious, impossibly incompetent son anything that might discourage him from realizing his potential. In burning through her love for him in this mode, Shirogane has most likely locked himself out of ever being perceived as a romantic partner by Fujiwara, but frankly, that's best for everyone involved. What I've just listed are the most commonly seen forms, but of course they're far from the only ones. Ramen Fighter Chika offers her own unique balance of honesty and dishonesty by being sincere in her love of ramen, but utterly deluded about her commitment to her diet. Fortune Teller Chika is a sort of living embodiment of the Barnum effect. Yes, there are countless rare Chikas out there to find and collect. List your favorites in the comments below. By shifting quickly through all these different modes, Akasaka is able to use Chika, in essence, like a train turntable, taking the plot off whatever track that Shirogane or Kaguya thought it was on and sending it careening off in a much funnier direction without actually making it feel like he's railroading things. And outside those group scenes, she's able to comedically compliment pretty much any character you put her next to, sometimes acting as an exasperated straight man when, say, Shirogane needs to be a goof, or conversely, out-goofing every other member of the cast with ease. Few characters in all of fiction, let alone anime, are as versatile and well-developed as Chika Fujiwara. I could analyze her for days. But there are other, almost as good characters we still need to discuss. Namely, the main ones and their families, or in Kaguya's case, the person her family pays to stand in for them. Now, you might think it odd that we're only getting to them now, roughly 2/3 of the way through this holy mother of El Cantare long character analysis of the anime that they're the main characters of, but that is simply the only way that mere mortals like you or I can ever dare to approach the great and terrible Kaguya Shinomiya, or the paragon of working-class diligence and virtue, Miyuki Shirogane. Just as John Watson's bright yet fundamentally ordinary perspective provides a filter through which a common man might appreciate Sherlock Holmes' blinding brilliance, so too do Chika, Miko, and you aid us in understanding what drives the aloof and unapproachable geniuses at the heart of this tale. Don't tell Chika that, though. She really wants to be Sherlock, and it'd break her heart to know someone else caught Lupin. Still, she can at least take solace in being the cast counterpart to the closest thing this anime has to a real master thief. Just as Ino is a reflection of Shirogane and Ishigami of Shinomiya, so too does Chika Fujiwara have a clear character foil of her own, Ai Hayasaka. Both serve the purpose of manipulating events within the clubroom, but Ai does so subtly, with careful control from behind the scenes and only at Kaguya's behest, whereas Chika does so mostly at random by inserting herself into the middle of everything in a desperate bid for attention. But that's far from the only parallel between them. They're both individuals who contain multitudes, adapting their forms to the situation as it demands, except where Chika is a natural chameleon operating wholly on instinct. All of Ai's costume and persona changes are quite deliberate, a product of exacting training as an assistant and agent for the Shinomiya group. Still, regardless of the psychology behind it, the fact remains that they're both characters who could easily fill out an entire gacha roster by themselves. Now let's regard more of that psychology, shall we? You see, all of Chika's forms are, at their heart, expressions of some aspect or another of her true inner Chika, whereas Ai's disguises are all meant to hide her inner self completely. Even the face that she shows Kaguya as her maid isn't really the real her. As we learn through the current top contender for Best Anime Fight of the Year, the rap battle episode, Ai doesn't entirely have a handle on who the real her even is, because everything about her identity has had to bend around her position as Kaguya's subordinate for as long as she can remember. Chika, conversely, knows exactly who Chika is, and that's in large part thanks to Kaguya too, actually. And even still, there are yet more parallels between them. You know how Chika likes to play games with her friends? Well, Hayasaka does too, but less in the gather round the table and throw dice sense of the word, and more in the fucking with people because her job sucks and those idiots make it too easy sense. Which, I mean, can you really blame her? Kaguya and Miyuki are immensely entertaining people. The success of this anime is testament enough to that. And in yet another interesting parallel, where Chika tries to use her games to bring joy to her friends and uplift the mood in the clubroom, but ultimately only ends up spreading misery and getting in the way most of the time, Hayasaka's spiteful manipulations of her friends often give them exactly the push they needed at that moment to better their lives. I could go on and on about the links between these characters, but I've made my point, and I'd be missing a much greater point that Ai and Chika's relationship as character foils proves with definitive mathematical certainty that the inverse of a best girl is still a best girl. A stunning breakthrough in waifu theory, the ramifications of which won't be fully understood for years to come. And if you need more proof of that breakthrough, look no further than the many parallels between best girl Kaguya and best girl Ishigami, or between best boy Miyuki and best boy Miko, for that matter. Now, Ai's relationship with her mistress is complicated, to say the least. Without a doubt, she loves Kaguya deeply, because, true to the legend that she takes her name from, it's basically impossible to spend time around the princess without coming to love her on some level. They're basically like sisters to each other, but At the same time, Ai resents Kaguya and the whole Shinomiya clan just as deeply for robbing her of her youth and the right to define her own identity. And recently, more specifically, she's also getting increasingly frustrated with how much time her increasingly stupid mistress is wasting toying with the heart of the only guy whose piercing eyes have ever seen through to the real Ai. Not that she'd ever betray Kaguya by making a move on the president, of course, unless Kaguya stupidly dared her to do that, though she certainly might, fuck with the both of them a little, as she's wont to do, and hey, if something happens, things happen. And if things don't happen, well, that's frustrating too, really frustrating, but she'll survive. She's been through worse, and she's got options, since one other thing that she and Chika have in common is that it's heavily implied they're both bisexual. Don't you worry about this rom-com leaving your faves high and dry in the land of the shipless. Aka Akasaka's got every angle covered. And of course, so does Kaguya when it comes to her many plans to ensnare the president, which Ai is the key to most of, along with the army of Shinomiya house staffers at her command, which kind of highlights a major inconsistency, dare I say, a lie in one of the narrator stated premises of this anime, that Miyuki and Kaguya are suitors of equal status battling on an even playing field, because that is very not true. And it makes perfect sense that it wouldn't be, because this whole manga is loosely based on the tale of the bamboo cutter, and there, Princess Kaguya and her suitors weren't equals at all. Indeed, if Shirogane is akin to royalty within Shuchin, then Kaguya is the closest thing this little world has to a god. Her family has their claws deep in the board of directors, and that's far from the only thing they're deep in. In fact, even if you pull out to the greater world surrounding the school, Shinomiya's status is still definitively that of a minor deity. Shinomiya Zaibatsu is one of the single biggest corporate entities in all of Japan, with fingers in every industry you can think of, particularly banking and transportation, and yen equal to $1.5 trillion at their disposal. And that's just the side of their power that they show to the public. They own journalists, politicians, cops, judges, and anyone else that an amoral international conglomerate might need to have on hand to cover up a scandal or make another problem go away. And growing up in that environment has very much colored Kaguya's personality. The show plays it for laughs every time it happens, like, oh, look at Kaguya, she's having another yandere moment, so cute and quirky, but her fantasies about making people disappear, mostly Chika when they displease her, are way too specific and consistent to be simple fantasies. Her family can definitely do that. Her family definitely has done that. And that's just one of many examples of how they casually trample over people's lives and livelihoods to get what they want. Kaguya thinks nothing of using coercion and bribery to win the student council election, and she has a whole team of corpo spies on hand just to manipulate her crush. The Shinomiya family motto literally commands her to reject love and use others lest she be used. Needless to say, Kaguya's childhood was a touch starved of familial affection. The closest she got, besides Hayasaka, of course, who's like a sister to her, like I said, is strict instruction in the methods, theories, and techniques that helped her family rise to such staggering power and dominate Japanese society for decades. This upbringing created the cold, calculating Ice Queen ego that drove all of her actions up until Shirogane awakened Bakaguya, her stupid, horny id. But she needs both of them to get what either wants. It's the Ice Queen side of her that's so skilled in concocting plans within plans within plans to ensnare her prey, and the Bakaguya side that suggests, hey, it might be fun if he ate me up instead. Kaguya also had access to literally the best instructors money can buy for any subject you can think of, with near unlimited free time to pursue her interests so long as her family saw a benefit to them, which went a long way toward building her reputation as a multi-talented genius savant. And that isn't entirely undeserved. Her sharp wit and refined grace in almost all situations are impossible to deny, but it isn't entirely accurate either. It would be closer to the mark to say that she was born with an insane wealth of opportunities and just enough innate talent to take full advantage of them. Understanding that distinction is the key to understanding how her style of loving warfare differs from that of the president. You see, Kaguya is blessed with a photographic memory, which makes it easy for her to excel in classwork and especially tests, and allows her to perform any action with grace and perfection so long as she's done it that way once before. When she told the mass media / Kaguya fan club that she learned to shoot a bow by getting a lucky bullseye once and repeating that exact same motion every time, she was being completely honest. Using perfect recall, she can also access and assess a huge amount of data at once, which gives her a huge head start when it comes to any analytical task. What it doesn't do, however, is make the analytical faculties of her brain work any faster or better. Without a common upbringing, Kaguya has been left with basically zero common sense, and in any situation where she doesn't have a strategy prepared or prior experience to draw from, be that romance, buying a movie ticket, or using computer, her capacity for independent problem solving is quickly revealed to be, shall we say, lacking?
かぐや様、いきなり入ってくるのはやめ。
Twitter 悪禁にされちゃったの。
アクセス禁止なんてよく知ってましたね。
This is why Kaguya is so much less effective at handling Chika-chan's curveballs than the president, and why, when he does catch her on the back foot, she gets so adorably flustered and panicky so easily. Though you can never quite count her out entirely thanks to her exceptionally keen intuition, the trait that she shares with Ishigami. And when Kaguya does arrive at a new plan of action, she always follows it instantly and decisively. She does find herself on the back foot quite often, though, in spite of her meticulous plans, because on-the-fly tactics and analysis are where Shirogene's at his strongest. Seemingly by instinct, the president is able to break problems down to their base components in an instant and formulate a game plan that addresses all of them in order not long after that. This mindset leads him to approach physical and musical challenges like he's playing quap with his actual body, much to Fujiwara's consternation, but when it comes to academic and logical challenges, there's essentially no problem he can't solve given enough time to put in the work. Hell, given enough time, a lot of time, and a lot of help, he can even do kind of okay in gym class. He's also taken on a wide variety of odd jobs over the years to help put food on his destitute family's table, which have left him with a wide variety of useful skills, from planning events to piloting yachts. All that experience has taught him how to learn quickly and improvise, and if you actually look at the areas where he struggles most, fashion, sports, and music, it's all things that teenagers learn from either hanging out with other teenagers or going to clubs, activities that he's never had time for. So it makes perfect sense that he'd be lacking there, though, you know, try telling that to Fujiwara. At any rate, the president's capacity for critical thinking is so great that he's able to outmaneuver not just Kaguya, not just Hayasaka, but the entire Shinomiya staff without even being aware that Kaguya has their help roughly 50% of the time. Not that he does it entirely by himself. Often he'll snatch victory from the jaws of defeat by predicting and exploiting an opening that one of the other council members creates, or even manipulating them into helping him. He's good at reading people in general and knows his friends especially well, Kaguya best of all. Still, figuring out how to leverage those connections to get what he wants is a testament to his critical thinking skills in and of itself, and in that regard at least, his genius has no equal in the series. The Season 3 finale proves that quite definitively, for not even Ai Hayasaka, the queen of subterfuge, is able to grasp the primal laws of chaos firmly enough to manipulate the actions of Subject F without constant supervision the way that the president does in that arc. Shirogane was able to figure out that if Chika believes there's a game afoot, she'll ignore everything and everyone else around her to focus on winning it at all costs, especially if he can make that game smell like love, and he used that to maneuver both her and Kaguya exactly where he wanted them. On top of that, he's also the #1 student in his grade, not just in the school, but in the entire country, which is a pretty strong sign of his intellect too, but honestly, small potatoes next to the Chika thing. After seeing that, no one should be surprised that Kaguya can't even touch his GPA. In that sense, too, the premise stated by the narrator is wrong. This isn't a war of love and brains between two geniuses. It's between one affluent prodigy with every advantage and unlimited resources, and one actual, genuine, bona fide genius of the 1% inspiration, 99% perspiration variety, which is the bare minimum that a commoner would need to be to even have a shot with someone as elite as Kaguya, or so Shirogane believes, at least. He needs to put himself ahead of her, become the kind of person that she'd do the confessing to first, or, in his mind, he'll spend their whole relationship chasing after her and ultimately fall behind. So he chose to work for the top spot, as is his lot as a working class man. But Miyuki Shirogane's not just any worker, he's the hardest worker. And so that plan, as much of a moonshot as it was, actually worked. And it did a lot more good for him than just winning his crush's favor. Shuchin is an old school, one that's raised up generation after generation of nobility, merchants, military leaders, and even royalty for several hundred years now. It's an enclave of the Japanese elite, a place where status and wealth go hand in hand, and to many, impure, scholarship-riding transfer students are seen as outsiders, quota fillers enjoying the generosity of their betters. In order to fit in there at all, he needs to be self-evidently better than the vast majority of his peers, and to claim a position of leadership, he needed to be the best of the best, exude an almost delusional level of confidence, and somehow live up to it, at least in the public eye. So, as silly as his late-night volleyball practice is, it actually is kinda necessary for reasons beyond just protecting a fragile teen ego. And as a politician's daughter, Chika would be acutely aware of that, so that may at least be part of why she chooses to help him each time. Shirogane's humble upbringing doesn't strictly put him at a disadvantage, though. It's also made him resourceful and resilient, and the close quarters that he's forced to share with his family have taught him to be exceptionally patient and considerate. Exceptionally patient, given the way his dad can be. Papa Shirogane is, much like his son, a man who always follows his heart and says what's on his mind, which is an admirable trait from almost any perspective, except when you're the teenage child of that kind of guy, and most of what's on his mind is extremely probing personal questions and dad jokes. But that's not the only thing that the elder Shirogane has in common with his son. By all accounts, he was a very similar kind of dude in high school, skilled in academics and chasing popular girls several orders of magnitude out of his league, and somehow making it work. But he never quite had the same rigid self-discipline as his son does now, and when the pharmaceutical firm that he founded was forced to fold through a combination of internal mismanagement and external corporate malfeasance, he fell apart. Unable to hold down a steady job, constantly bouncing between temp gigs and scammy side hustles, and probably drinking a little too much too. The stress of it all was way too much for his wife to take, so she took Miyuki's little sister, Kei, and just left. The situation she left for must not have been great either, considering that Kei eventually came back, but having 3 mouths to feed again only makes scraping by that much harder. Considering all that he's been through and all that he still does for his kids, Papa Shirogane's one of the most admirable dads in anime. He's also one of the funniest. Like, anytime this man appears in a gag setup, you know that episode/chapter is gonna be gold. Plus, he's got a ton of hard-earned wisdom and random knowledge stored up in him to boot. So, while he may embarrass his son from time to time, largely on purpose because he thinks it's funny, most of Miyuki's friends and classmates who actually meet him end up thinking pretty highly of him. Somewhat ironically, Kei Shirogane has the exact same problem, except it's not caused by her dad. Rather, Miyuki is the source of her embarrassment. See, Kei is, much like her brother, an intelligent, driven, and fiercely independent tsundere. In the throes of her rebellious phase, she hates nothing more than being doted on and given special treatment. And on top of that, as a tsundere, feelings of affection and gratitude in general instantly trigger her fight-or-flight response. And that's really unlucky for both her and her brother, because not only has her absence from the household made Miyuki's heart grow much fonder in general, his specific abandonment issues compel him to cling to the part of his family he'd never thought he'd get back with reckless abandon. Feelings that combine to create a deep-seated but entirely platonic sister complex. Miyuki will do anything for his precious Imoto, whether she likes it or not. And because he's an extremely compassionate and considerate person, most of the things that he does for her are actually things that most teenage girls would really appreciate, like a little something extra at Christmas and birthdays. But, as they say, everything is relative, and when the amount of space that you have relative to your relatives is this low, anything they do can be an annoyance, so she complains about him non-stop, which her friends interpret as bragging because literally everything that he does for her is amazing. He's like the perfect older brother, and one of those friends happens to be Moeha Fujiwara, so Kei has inadvertently put her brother in quite a bit of danger, plus inflicted an astounding amount of delayed psychic damage to Chika. On the flip side of all that, despite their disagreements, Kei is so much like her brother at heart that Kaguya is even willing to accept her as a president substitute when the real McCoy isn't around. And Kei, for her part, thinks quite highly of Kaguya as well. In fact, her ideal scenario is to somehow become Kaguya's little sister, which of course means that the idea of her brother and Kaguya getting together is completely horrifying to her because he's such a loser and a perv to boot, and he'd just defile Kaguya's perfectness. Still, despite all this, deep down, all the Shiroganes love each other deeply. They're a family that looks out for each other no matter what, and they've shaped who Miyuki is as a man. From his father, he learned how to solve difficult problems, how to make do with whatever he can get his hands on, and how to adapt to any job that needs doing. Caring for his sister, meanwhile, has reinforced his compassionate side and greatly strengthened his resolve in the face of insults and ridicule. And their whole living situation in general has molded him into the kind of person who always puts others first. A man who will take what he can, however he can, unless it's at someone else's expense. But the president has one other defining trait that he didn't learn from either of them: how to lead and take decisive action, how to stop fixating on what he can't do when things are at their hardest, and figure out what he can do. That only Kaguya was able to teach him, just as only he, with his selfless kindness, could ever teach her how to open up and connect with others. There are a lot of things that make Kaguya-Sama Love is War a great anime. The huge, well-defined cast, the phenomenal jokes, the beautiful animation, the clever outside-the-box plotting, and the clever outside-the-box plans our heroes arrive at in response to those plots. But there's one thing above all else that elevates it above almost all other manga and anime in this genre, and that's Kaguya and Miyuki's relationship. These kids were absolutely made for each other, and through everything, the laughs, the tears, the nail-biting tension, that truth can be felt in every episode and on every page of the series. These two share a rare kind of fictional love that is every bit as intoxicating as the real thing. On the most basic elevator pitch level, the dynamic between Shirogane and Shinomiya can be described as what if two tsunderes fell for each other. Both of them are too proud to confess their feelings, but they both really want to date each other, so they have to force each other to confess using the tsundere's secret weapon, passive aggression. And sometimes the tsundere's not secret weapon, aggressive aggression. If you're not familiar with all the romance anime tropes, this is still a very funny and entertaining character dynamic, but if you are, then the story works on a completely different level, playing mind games with you the same way the central pair does with each other, anticipating your expectations and upending them with panache. Often, when a rom-com plays around with tropes and subverts cliches this aggressively, it's a way to cover for otherwise weak or poorly justified romantic writing. Leading men and ladies whose on-screen chemistry begins and ends with, oh, I guess I'd watch 'em bone. Not so in this case. The reasons for both Kaguya and Shirogane's attraction to each other are crystal clear. They both embody what the other lacks. Kaguya is strong, smart, gifted with natural grace, and takes action where all others hesitate. Miyuki has a loving family, a massive, generous heart, and the strength of will to live as he chooses, even without any money. He also has eyes. Weary, piercing eyes with a 1,000-yard, 3 hours of sleep a night, 5-cup of coffee glare that Kaguya finds to be utterly irresistible. It's a whole thing, a whole kinky thing, and a very concerning thing, even to Kashiwagi, who, as we've established, is really in no position to judge. Since we're here to psychoanalyze, it probably has something to do with one of the few times in Kaguya's life that she made eye contact with her extremely busy and distant father, but maybe don't tell Shirogane that. If he hasn't figured it out for himself yet, he doesn't want to. Kink is actually a pretty common theme in Kaguya-Sama. Chika lets slip that she'd like a guy who will rough her up a little when she and Kaguya find a shoujo manga magazine. Miko's got that thing for baldies and an apparent ASMR kink, and she seems to be into age regression and pet play. And if I keep going, this video will be another hour. You don't even want to know what's running through the president's mind half the time.
あらあら、篠宮様お気をつけください。こういう男に限って性欲強いですから。
まあ、否定はしませんけど。
And, of course, we can't forget about Moeha Fujiwara. Not without a heaping helping of therapy, anyhow. All things considered, these teenagers are about as horny and weird as, well, real teenagers. They're at least 50% hornier and weirder than your average rom-com, anime, or manga cast, yet somehow, at the same time, they're a solid 95% less naked. There's only a few pages or shots in the entire thing where the girls so much as wear swimsuits. Hell, the upcoming Hot Springs arc features one of the most hilariously perverse Hot Springs peeping gags I've ever seen in any manga, and it manages it without needing anyone to disrobe or break the law. That's not to say that you can't pay to see these characters in various states of undress if you want to. The second season had a pretty blurst OVA with tons of jiggle physics, and the official doujinshi offers fan service of both the skimpy outfit variety and the what if your favorite ship happened variety, all of which is really fun if you, like me, enjoy anime bullshit. But not everyone does, and I think it's a smart choice on Kaguya-Sama's part to make the vast majority of its anime bullshit opt in, because that allows the series to explore in depth depth, the messy and unconventional side of teenage sexuality without making anyone unduly uncomfortable. And it allows kink compatibility to be something that the series' shipping dynamics actually take into account, which immediately makes this more realistic and romantically relatable than a good 99% of entries in the genre. The series plays that sense of realism against the more heightened capital A anime aspects of its storytelling to even more effective, effect. As a 16-year-old boy living in contemporary Tokyo, Shirogane is naturally all too aware of what it means for a boy his age to act like an anime character, which is normally all it takes for such a boy to stop doing that. But what Shirogane doesn't realize, of course, is that he is an anime character. The main one, even. The kind of handsome, perfect Bishonen bad boy who can actually get away with telling a girl he'll make all her dreams come true, or confessing his love whilst wearing a cape and a top hat. And the kind of Bishonen boy who just can't help acting like that on a wave of overconfident euphoria. But eventually that wave does subside as self-awareness sets back in, and what's left in its wake is hilarious every time. The first time, not realizing that Kaguya actually thought he was a total bishy dreamboat when he whisked her off to see the fireworks, so much so that she didn't actually look at the fireworks, Shirogane spends the entire next day freaking out about how cringy all that was and wrongly assuming that Kaguya can't bring herself to even look at him for reasons other than how devastatingly attractive he suddenly is to her. Realizing that he's nervous too is enough to snap her out of this state and push her to make a move, almost, but he's so oversensitive about the topic that he runs away before she can finish it, thus setting the game state back to neutral. A lot of rom-com anime fans tend to get frustrated with status quo resets like this, and I totally get why, but they're a necessary evil of the format. For the sake of good pacing, you need your characters to frequently hit big, dramatic, emotional milestones without actually advancing their romance all that quickly, and this scene is a positively brilliant way of accomplishing that. Not only is it a supremely fucking funny meta joke about rom-com tropes that doubles as a handy "don't try this at home" warning for any would-be Ishigamis in the audience, it's also very true to the characters, a misunderstanding directly rooted in their already established flaws and hang-ups. The president is supremely confident in every area where he has expertise, and able to fake it till he makes it in everything else, but that can only take him so far when he's actually out of his depth, which everyone is in matters of first love, and when that confidence fails him, he has nothing to fall back on. Kaguya is worldly, learned, and capable in almost all things, but she has basically zero experience dealing with any emotions, let alone one as overwhelming as her first love, and while her decisive nature is usually an advantage, it sometimes leads her to act rashly like this without fully considering the implications and consequences of what she's doing. Every interaction between this couple across well over 200 chapters is just as psychologically grounded as the one I just described, and most, if not all of them, reveal something new and fascinating about at least one of these characters and the many ways that they're perfect for each other. But a story is no good without at least a little room for doubt. That's where the tension lives, after all. Great romantic chemistry is no guarantee of a happy ending, and the vast darkness of the Shinomiya clan casts a long shadow over this cute little couple. Kaguya-Sama very deliberately focuses on the bright, happy, and funny part of these kids' lives, but with time it's revealed that every one of them has some sort of trauma in their not-so-distant past, and there are hints throughout the series foreshadowing trouble in the not-too-distant future that threatens to end all of their happiness. And even if you don't catch those hints, if you know your Japanese folklore, there's something else that's pretty hard to ignore here. Kaguya-Sama is heavily inspired by the tale of Princess Kaguya. Every major character is named after one of the characters or key plot items in Japan's oldest surviving monogatari, and that story ends, as we learn in the stargazing episode if we haven't already seen the hit Ghibli movie, with the princess's godly family taking her back to their home on the moon, leaving her one true love, the Emperor, with nothing but an elixir of immortality to remember her by, which he promptly destroys in a fit of despair, not wanting to live in a world without her. So that doesn't bode super well for her relationship with Miyuki to begin with, and to make matters even worse, he's not actually the story's analog to the Emperor, her fated love. His name evokes that of Otomo no Miyuki, the fourth of 5 noble suitors to whom Kaguya assigned impossible tasks that they had to complete to win her hand in marriage. So no matter how much she likes Shirogane right now, anyone who knows the original story will know at the back of their mind that there's another guy out there whose destiny is cosmically intertwined with Kaguya's. However, it's not enough to simply look at the events of the original Monogatari and assume that they're a template for how this one will turn out. When Kaguya-sama can so deftly manipulate your expectations with genre tropes alone, then doing so with direct literary allusions is but a trifle. And if you really know the original story, then you know that by the end of the 3rd season, Miyuki has already far surpassed his original role. Otomo no Miyuki was asked by Princess Kaguya to retrieve a colored jewel from a dragon's neck, and set out to sea to find one, but ultimately turned back in the face of a great and terrible storm. Symbolically, this failing is reflected in Shirogane's inability to swim, and Chika has yet to help him overcome that, but that's ultimately immaterial because in the Culture Festival arc, he was able to successfully surpass his literary counterpart and steal the dragon's jewel, in the form of a rather esoteric papier-mâché sculpture on the school's roof. Then he presents it in all its fiery, multicolored splendor to Kaguya, winning her heart in both a figurative and literal sense in what has gotta be the most beautiful scene in any anime this year so far. The beauty of which is only slightly retroactively tainted by the knowledge that beneath that tasteful censorship balloon, Kaguya was using way too much tongue, just like Kashiwagi taught her. Of course, clearing that hurdle doesn't automatically mean that Shirogane will be able to stop Kaguya's family from returning her to the moon one day, but even when that happens, he's already told her what he'd do. Unlike the Emperor, the president would gladly drink the elixir of immortality that Princess Kaguya left behind, and spend the eternity that he'd been granted by it finding a way to reach her up in the heavens again. And logically, he has one of 2 ways to make that happen. Either he builds a vessel that can make the journey up there, puts together a trustworthy and capable crew to man it, and sets out to take her back, or he could bring heaven crashing down to Earth. Which brings us, at long last, to the obligatory part of the video essay where I tell you how this is all about socialism.
God knows I want to break free.
We're all aware that as a video essayist, it is my solemn duty to explain how everything is about how capitalism is bad. But I definitely don't want to simply project my own Western politics onto this Japanese work, so the first thing we need to do to make that happen is back the assertion up using the text itself, and pointing out that Shirogane is a working-class hero upending a world of out-of-touch, emotionally detached elites won't cut it, because every commoner at a rich kid's school story does that to some extent, and it would be pretty ridiculous to call Ouran High School Host Club socialist. No, what we really need here is a concrete reference to a specific political ideology buried in the text itself. And thankfully, Kaguya-Sama is happy to oblige. In Season 3, Episode 2, or Chapter 59 of the manga, when the student council is preparing to depart from the chamber on the last day of their term, the last place they check before leaving is a dark and dusty secret staircase hidden behind the filing cabinet. The protagonists theorize that this hidden room was constructed by one of the previous student councils as a meeting place for the school's student movement. Now, at this moment, you're probably wondering what the heck a student movement is, unless you're a weirdo like me who likes to study Japanese history, in which case you'll know that it was a leftist revolutionary movement that swept across Japan in the late 60s in protest of rising tuition, institutional corruption, unpaid internships, Japan's role in Vietnam, and a host of other local and national issues, which, at its height, had 40% of all Japanese universities either on strike or under physical occupation. While the movement itself eventually faltered after violent clashes with riot cops and other leftist splinter factions led to a decline in public support, it continued in pockets across the nation throughout the 70s and 80s, and the protests had a lasting impact on Japanese education, politics, and culture. Within Japan, the Zenkyoto helmet is still widely recognized as a revolutionary symbol. And speaking of symbols, this here hidden door sure is a big one. I mean, the mere fact that the room is hidden suggests that this particular branch of the student movement is one of the more radical ones that persisted through the 70s as public support fell off. Now, to be clear, by itself, the door does nothing to prove that the broader series is pro-socialist or anti-capitalist. What it does prove, however, is that the concept of revolutionary socialism canonically exists within the carefully curated fictional universe of this anime whose OPs are all about blowing up very expensive buildings. And maybe it's worth considering the implications of that. To me, the door implies two things. Firstly, that the current student council are, in a sense, carrying on the legacy of the student council that first built that chamber. A message reinforced by the fact that Shirogane uses this very same hidden chamber to concoct the confession that allowed him, a commoner, to conquer the heart of an untouchable elite. Secondly, given that the door was kind of just sitting there unnoticed for all this time, that suggests that there are subtle, subtextual messages hidden in those episodes and chapters as well that point to the deeper themes of the story.
誰もが立ち向かわなきゃならない強大な敵はいます。誰ですか？それはこの社会です。社会
Yeah, just like that. Okay, not really. I mean, the way that Kashiwagi and her boyfriend rebel against society is by raising money for the Red Feather Community Chest, the Japanese division of United Way, which is certainly a very good charity built on principles of mutual aid and collectivism, but also, just as certainly, very much a part of society. Kaguya and Shirogane's love may have the power to shake Shuchin and the world of wealth it represents to their foundations, but the school rebuilds after each explosion in each season. Its elitist system hasn't become fundamentally different, just a little better under Miyuki's guidance, just as the previous president hoped it would, and the president before him, all the way back to the one who built that secret base to hide the student rebellion, and way back before him or her to the Shuchin students who died for their society's folly in World War II, whose military insignias were melted down into the fourragère the president wears on his uniform, and whose lives, to this day, quite literally weigh on the president's shoulders. It's all part of the same contiguous struggle to protect the freedom of future generations from detached, greedy old men with too much power. Which isn't really a specifically socialist message at all, but more of a broad rallying cry to the entire Japanese left, a group that has a very complicated relationship with socialism and communism, stemming in large part from the stigma created by those violent student insurrections that we were just talking about. So, I'm sorry, feature-length video essay fans, but I've failed you. The best I can do is prove that this anime is socialism adjacent. But that doesn't make its very Japanese brand of progressivism any less valuable or interesting. The political philosophy that Kaguya-Sama espouses has a bit of an incrementalist bent to it. Miyuki and Miko both bring about small, positive changes for the school by wielding their power on the council and disciplinary committee responsibly, but also sometimes they do crimes to get shit done when shit's gotta get done. So there's a clear respect for existing authorities and social structures baked into the narrative, but also an understanding that existing authorities can be fuck-ups with bad ideas, and in that case, it's totally cool and good to push back against them. Furthermore, the story emphasizes time and again the importance of mutual aid, of supporting your neighbors and especially your friends. Kaguya-Sama has as much to say about the power of friendship as it does the power of love, and specifically cites both as motivating forces that help us both better ourselves as individuals and stand up against unjust authority, or foul-mouthed French bitches, for those we seek to protect. Aka Akasaka has woven a lot of powerful, transgressive ideas into the fabric of his narrative, and done so seamlessly that at first glance, you don't even notice the patterns at all. But when you take the time to unfold Kaguya-Sama's many layers of premium production values, uproarious comedy, heart-pounding romance, heart-racing strategical action, intricate social systems, and cavernously deep character writing, they form a detailed and thoughtful picture of the age-old conflict between basic human needs and connections and the perverse incentives of power. A conflict in which falling in love might just be the ultimate act of war. Wait, did I really just say that? I was trying to sound profound, but oh no, was that actually cringe? We're in the end game of a video this long and I blow it now? What's wrong with me? Oh God, I just want to go hide in a hole, but I must press on. Ahem. Turn all that around and look at it from another angle, though, and suddenly those same aspects reform into an inspirational and uplifting message about the transformative power of love. From another angle, it's a tightly plotted game of cat and mouse with a keen sense for strategy and a firm grasp on political, economic, and sociological theory. And from another angle yet again, it's simply a rip-roaring rom-com that's funny as fuck and sweet as shit to boot. Just like Kaguya-Sama's anime bullshit, all of the highfalutin, artsy-fartsy bullshit that I've just spent the last 2 weeks of my life and the last at least hour of yours unpacking and analyzing is totally opt-in. Though few will fully appreciate Kaguya-Sama's true brilliance, anyone can effortlessly enjoy its fun factor over and over again. And that just might be the single most genius thing about it. I'm Geoff Thew, professional anime couples therapist, and I can't really think of a way to end that joke. I've been working on this so long, and I just want to sleep.